So again, this week we're covering optimizing saving images for the web and how that differs from working with images for print. And what I've started with is an image of a dog that I took with my phone, the camera on my phone. Okay. So the first thing that I need to look at is the file size. I need to look at its size in pixels. I need to look at the file format. What kind of file type is it? You know, since it was taken with my phone, there's a good chance that it's a JPEG. But I've opened it in Photoshop, and that's where we're going to start, and we're going to save our original as a Photoshop file. I think that's always good practice, so that when you add any adjustment layers or you modify it in any way, you generally, as we've done with print, we can work in a non-destructive fashion, and we can always go back and edit it and change it. Because when you work with the compressed file formats that are generally used for the web, once they've been saved in those file formats, you cannot go back and edit them easily. In fact, most of the things that you've done to them are generally fairly destructive. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go up to image, go to image size. You don't have to go here, but this is a good place to start. And we can see that it's 4,032 pixels by 3,024 pixels at 72 pixels per inch. If I want to know how that translates in inches, I just switch to inches, and you can see. So at with a low resolution image, okay, it's quite large, much too large for the web. Since the web is measured usually in pixels rather than inches, and we're trying to translate and go back and forth between inches and pixels and adjust this for screen size, then I'm going to go back to pixels. Okay. So what I need to do is I'm going to leave the resolution as is. Okay. Because for the web, we only need screen resolution, which is 72 pixels per inch. You don't need any higher than that. The resolution for if you're using a PC is 96. 72 is the low, but it's useful. That's the one that the Mac uses. And it serves us well for this right now, okay? So the next thing is I need to decide what I'm going to do with this. And before I do anything, I'm going to save this as a Photoshop file. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I'm going to save it on my desktop. And I'm going to put it in a folder just so that I have it. I can isolate it from everything else here. And you can save yours wherever you want. And instead of a JPEG, I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file. And I want to create a new folder. And that new folder is going to be Bagel Demo. And it's going to be 04/28/2020. That's today's date. Okay, so that's where I'm going to save that. And I'll call it Bagel Blanket Demo. Okay. You might want to pay attention to how I'm naming my file. This is my Photoshop file. Okay. Because I'm going to talk about that in a minute after we get it all ready to go. The next thing that I would need to do now that I've saved it, that I've prepared it as a Photoshop file, is that I've left my original JPEG intact. It's all done. That's my original. And now I have basically a copy of it as a Photoshop file. And now I'm ready to make some changes to that. Perhaps before I do, though, what I want to do is I'm going to go to Image, and I'm going to duplicate it, just so I'm not working on the original. Okay, so there's my bagel image here. And what I want to do is I want to go to image size again, leave it at 72 pixels per inch, measure it in pixels, and now I've determined that what the size that I want is that I want the maximum width to be 400 pixels, which on the web is a pretty good size image. For one that covers the entire screen of a large monitor, you could have up to maybe 2,000 pixels. But for, you know, most web pages, if you have an image that's 400, 500, even 600 pixels, that's pretty good size. It might go up to 1,000. It might be close to 800 pixels in width. But yeah, those are large images. For us, 400 pixels would be just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 400. Okay, and you can see that the width is 400. I made sure that the width and the length or height were linked to one another so that there's no distortion. And I click OK. And this will significantly reduce it in size. And I'll enlarge it a little bit. So this is the image that I want for my web. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this. Okay, I'm going to duplicate the layer. So just Command J, that's just good practice. And I'm going to name the layer. And I'm going to name it Bagel Blanket for demo dot JPEG. Okay, JPEG. So if you notice how I've named this, and I'll show you this, I'm just going to put some text on top of for a moment here. And there we go. And I'm going to use some white text. I don't want 600 pixels per inch, maybe 36. Let's try that. I'll center it. Anytime you're naming a file for the web, this is the practice that you should follow. If I were to name it like this, bagel, whoops, I don't want all caps. Oh, I know why that's happening here. Hold on here. I have to go to Window. I'm going to bring it up. Come on, where are you? Character. And one of the last settings is that all caps is turned on, and I want that turned on. So I'm going to go back. Oh, come on. Turn that on. There we go. BA space blanket demo .jpeg. Okay, .jpeg. Okay, that's not the way. That's for print. You can name your file this way just fine. There are a couple of things that are wrong with it. One, excuse me, is that when you begin a file name for the web, you never start it with a capital letter. That's one thing. Two, you never use spaces between letters. So I have an option here. Number one, I have to go back here and I have to put a lowercase b. Whoops, come on. Gotta turn that off again. Still have that turned on for the very beginning here. Lowercase b. There we go. Bagel. And now I have options here. If I want to leave space between the words, I can use an underscore. Or what I'm doing here, I can leave the capitals there, and I can remove the underscore. And this is my preference, just because I enjoy doing this. I don't know, I find it works for me. And this is how I named my original Photoshop file. And this is called camel casing, where you start with a lowercase, and then every time there's a split or a change in words, if you do have one that exceeds more than one word, then you can use a capital letter. And it's that break, it's that capital letter that enables you to see the separate words, when in fact it's all one word. So that's one thing that you can do. So I'm using camel casing. If you want to use or add, like this is version 2, you can always add that. It can be just 2, but you usually add it at the very end if you're going to do that. Okay. The other thing that you never do is, let's say I wanted bagel, and I wanted, instead of bagel blanket, and I wanted and demo, so I chose an ampersand. No. You never do that. You never use special characters. I never use, dollar signs. You never use exclamation points. You never use ampersands, any of those things. Because those are part of coding language generally. And that's something that you want to remove and get rid of. Okay? So this is typically how you name your file. That's what you do to start with. So what I've done is I've taken this first layer and I've named it. And I've already sized it. Okay. So I'm good at the size, and I can go ahead and I can name it with the JPEG extension, and it will automatically save it as a JPEG for me. If I go to File and I go to Generate Assets, Image Assets, okay, now I can go to my folder. Let's see where my folder is. I believe it's right up here. Okay. So here's the bagel blanket demo, and in here, let's go. I hope I put it in there. Maybe not. Here's the assets. Yeah, there we go. So here's the folder, or the bagel blanket Photoshop. Here's bagel blanket assets, and you'll notice right next to it. I guess I didn't put the bagel blanket demo in there, so it should be inside the folder. But you can see that it already has the bagel blanket JPEG in there. That's exactly what I want. Okay. So when do you use other file formats, or what, excuse me, other file formats can you use? In addition to the common one, which is JPEG, you can use GIF or PNG. It's also called GIF, GIF, and PNG. Those are the only 3 file formats you can use for the web for images, okay? For our purposes. There are scalable vector graphics, but we're not going to get into that. Another way that you can save for web is you can go to File, and we can also go down here and we can look to export. Let's see if we can go in here and make sure that this is, there we go, got that selected. File, and we can go to export, and we can go to save for web legacy. And this is something that I really like. You can look at just the original and zoom in. You can look at the optimized version, or you can look at it 2 up or 4 up. I always prefer 4 up, because in the upper left-hand corner, this gives me the option for looking for to the original. I'm making comparisons to the others. Now you'll notice over here, if we look down in the lower left-hand corner, we have JPEG. And you'll see that it's gone from 352K, and it's compressed down to 62K. And it will take, on an old 56K modem, 12 seconds to load. If I go down here, you'll see that this one is a little bit lower quality. This is medium quality, and it's doing this automatically. This, if I can't tell the difference between high quality and medium quality, this one will only take us 5 seconds to load. And it's reduced it to 23K. And here is a low quality one that will take 4 seconds to load. And it is only 16K. Now the difference between medium and low isn't that great, so maybe I'd want to pick medium if I can't tell a difference. But because we're working with T1 lines and cable modems, what I can do is I can switch up here and I can see how long this is going to take if I'm using 1 megabit per second on a cable. That's kind of the bare bones minimum. And you can see for all of these, it's even for the biggest file, it only takes 2 seconds. So if that's the target audience that you're going for, or people with high-speed internet connections, then don't even worry about the other ones. The next step would be to see, well, then what does it look like? Or, what are the file sizes with GIFs and PNGs? Well, I can select this one in the lower left-hand corner. Instead of JPEG, I'm going to select GIF. And you can see that this is considerably larger. This is 93K, and it will still only take 2K, or 2 seconds to load, but that's because it's at 1 megabit per second. But if I drop down to 56K, you can see that it's considerably longer. It takes 18 seconds. And if you don't think 12 and 18 seconds is very long between these, I suggest that you just stare at your computer or a watch or a clock for 18 seconds and see the difference. It will be really noticeable. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to ping 24-bit, and you can see that it really jumps. Now it takes 43 seconds to load. But again, if I'm using a high-speed internet connection, it's not going to make any difference at all. But before everybody had high-speed internet connections, or most people, I won't say everyone, this was an excellent tool to use to make and compare the difference between the download time that it would take to be able to actually see this in a browser. And it's still useful today, especially if your target audience is someone who still has a dial-up modem. And there are people throughout the world who have to use dial-up modems. So this is a useful tool. This is one that I would highly recommend. So the next step is that, well, when would you use a GIF or when would you use a PNG? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this layer again, Command J, and I'll show you. With JPEGs, you cannot have transparency. If you do have transparency in an image, what will happen is that it has to have a background color of some sort. So it's never really truly transparent. But let's say, for example, I wanted to have in a separate image, I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to create a circular image here. Let's go ahead and move this. So I just have Bagel's head in here. Okay, and I have that, and I'm going to go ahead and if I select clipping mask here, or layer mask, and let's turn off the other layers so I can see what's going on here. You can see I have an unusual shape. It's a circle. And when I use the word unusual, it's that all JPEGs have to be rectangular. But if I wanted a circular image on my website, and I wanted to create a clipping mask for that, and I wanted to be able to present it, even though this is a photographic image, which normally would use a JPEG, I have to select another file format. And in this particular instance, what we're going to do now is I'm going to rename it. And I'm going to go to the very end here. Instead of copy, I'm going to use GIF. Okay. And now, if I go back to the assets and I look in there, you'll see that I have that one that's already there. So this is a newer, more updated version of saving images for the web, that we are less concerned typically with file size and the file types and be able to save them quickly for the web. Now, this is no longer rectangular, it's no longer 400 by 400, but if I want a small image that maybe I'm going to use for a button, or I'm going to use as a, a thumbnail, and I don't want to initially show the whole image, then this would be a good way to do that. So now I can save that as a GIF. And you can see that the background is transparent. Okay. Another way that I can do that too now is I can say, well, what if I want something that's just, that I want it, the background to be totally transparent, but I want Bagel here to be, only have partial opacity. You can't do that with a GIF. You only can do that with a PNG. So I'm going to copy this layer again, Command J, and I'm going to change on this layer the opacity. And let's drill it all the way down to 50%. And I'm going to turn off the one underneath so you can see what's going on. So that this is actually see-through. I can see through this image. Not only have I clipped the background, but I can see through this image. And that's indicated by the transparent background here. Well, I can go ahead and I can rename this one. Instead of GIF, this is going to be PNG, PNG. And again, if I double click and I look inside here, you can see that the PNG file has already been saved. And this is transparent. If I were to open this up in any other file, that I would be able to see through this image. It just looks lighter and grayer when there's nothing else behind it. Okay, so that's a quick way, very, very quick way of creating images for the web. And you'll see that if I save this now, so this is my Bagel demo copy. I'm going to go ahead and just save it as file, save as. Make sure that I have my Photoshop file here. File, save it, save as. And I'm going to call it Bagel demo. Instead of copy, I'm going to call it version 2, because the reason that I'm doing that is because I have, whoops, I have cropped it, I have reduced it in size. And if I want to increase the size again, I need to go back to my original image. So I'm going to save that. Same place where the Bagel demo was the original one. So now I've created images that are used, that could be used for both print as well as for the internet. So let's go over that. Again, the 3 file types that you can use for the internet, typically for images like Bagel, photographs we've been using all throughout the semester, are JPEG, GIF, and PNG. More often than not, you're going to use a JPEG. And if you're going to add transparency by today's standards, you could use a PNG for both. The one that I used for a GIF as well as the one that I used for the PNG. GIFs are used least of all these days, unless I wanted to create a built-in animation. That would be what I would choose. The other thing to consider too is that your original file for your internet images are going to be is going to be a Photoshop file. So you can see I have saved all of these. What if I wanted even another one, maybe a black and white? Let's Command J. Let's turn this off. And this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the opacity up to 100%. But I want this one to be black and white. So let's go ahead and add that black and white layer. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 2 layers, as we've done with before, and to be able to save this as a black and white image, I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift, Option, Command E to combine those. And then I'll turn these 2 off, and I'll name this one Bagel Blanket Demo Black and White, BW for black and white. And this is going to be, this can be a JPEG. Okay. And again, just to check to make sure everything is good here. And you can see that I have one here. Where is it? Come on, come on, come on. Oh, that's right. I have that. I can't do that because I'm not thinking here. This one has to be, because you can't have transparency. So I'm just going to name this one a PNG. PNG. Now let's look at it again. There we go. So there's the black and white. Whoops, that's the PNG. Where's the other PNG? I don't have it. So why not? Oh, I know one. Here, I think I named it incorrectly. I need to look at my typo here. There's inverted some letters here. Bagel blanket demo. BW.png. Let's try that again. And I'm going to go ahead up here. I'm going to go to File and Generate Image Assets. And let's do that again. Let's look at that. Let's see in here. You know what? It's saved someplace else. So I'm not thinking here. Because I saved this as Bagel Blanket Demo 2, that's where that's going to be. So I probably have another file here that I wasn't paying attention to. So I'd have to go back to that original file. The one before I saved it is Photoshop version 2 and do that. So I would have to find that. So I'm trying to be clever here, and all the while I'm just making mistakes for you. Anyway, that's what we can do. So anyway, that's a little very short demonstration on file types and saving for the web in Photoshop. Another thing that you might consider too is that even if you aren't using these images for the internet, if you're planning on using them for social media, if you don't want to have a big bloated file, or maybe you just want to send a friend or your grandmother or somebody a copy of the image, then you want to save it as a low resolution file, then this would be the way to do it. Another good reason for doing that is if you're working for a client and you don't want them to be able to print the image that you have worked on, but you want to give them a preview of what you've worked on, then what you would do is you would send them a low resolution JPEG. So if they're happy with it and they chose to stiff you later on, and it does happen in the business, and they don't pay you, then what you can do is that by sending them a low res image, they could put it on the internet, but they wouldn't be able to print it because you need a high resolution image for that. Okay, so that's all I have to say for that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to pause.